and actually take a look at the render layer system. First thing we need to do is enable it, and we have active layer. Pretty similar to how lighting passes work, we need to assign a render layer ID to our geometry in order to have it separate into layers by the render layer system. This is done with the help of the object tag. Select both our objects, the floor and the land, and apply Octane object tag. Select the object layer tab, and at the bottom you will see layer ID 1. Currently, both objects are under layer ID 1, meaning they will render under active layer 1. If I change the layer ID of the floor to 2 and hide my background object and press render, since we have active layer 1 showing here, we will only see the line because it is under layer ID 1. If I change the active layer to 2, we'll see the floor because we set layer ID 2. As we already said, the floor is only meant to be used as shadow and reflection catcher, thus we won't use it. We'll stick with active layer 1. To help us better composite this object over an external plate, we have a few additional render passes available. Let's start with black shadows and colored shadows. If you remember, we can preview these separate passes by going under the display pass drop-down. As usual, we start with the beauty, which is the flat version of our composite. We have black shadows and colored shadows. Black shadows captures the shadows cast by the object in the active layer, and the information it creates is stored in the alpha channel. Colored shadows captures the shadow thrown by the objects in the active layer, but only if the object has a specular material applied with the fake shadows option enabled. Shadows groups both black shadows and colored shadows into one pass. Layer reflections. This is the reflection of the objects in the active layer over to the objects in the inactive layers. And certainly we don't need all of these passes. I'll only leave shadows and layer reflection. Like so. Once I'm satisfied with my setup, I will proceed with transferring this data over to Octane Render for rendering to the picture viewer. I'll start by selecting Octane from the renderer drop-down, then render passes, then I need to enable them. We'll get the familiar message. It says the post effect has been added under the native multipass option, which is fine. Let's give our composite a name. We'll call this render layer 1 and save it under my multipass folder. The format should be PSD, depth 16-bit, and I wish to export in linear with linear camera response curve. Let's open render passes, enable them, and match the options we selected in Octane settings. You can do that either manually or by clicking copy to video post. Next step is to set up the export for the flat beauty pass. Go under the native save menu and give it a name. Save it under my multipass folder select PSD 16-bit in linear, and since we enabled the alpha channel under the kernel settings, it is only logical to have it enabled when rendering to the picture view as well. Finally, on the Octane Render main, enable float buffer for the beauty image. Double check if our options are properly set, and if they are, simply press render. And we are done. Let's open the layers into Photoshop. And I will add the background